prices everywhere in our day-to-day lives. But what happens when the governments try to set prices? With me to discuss this is David Seymour from the Frontier Center for Public Policy.
Hi.
So David, what is government price fixing?
Well, government price fixing refers to government setting the price of a good or service rather than buyers and sellers negotiating one. For example, politicians might determine in some circumstances that the price of a loaf of bread should not exceed $1. Other times, governments try to keep prices up. And a really common example of that is the minimum wage, where they determine that the wages for an hour's work can't fall below, say, $10.
What is the rationale behind government fixing prices?
Well, the usual argument is that it protects the vulnerable. Politicians may reason that the price of bread is too high and people with limited means can't afford it, so they artificially lower the price. Likewise, the government may think a wage of less than $10 an hour is too low and sets the price of labor at $10 per hour or more.
Surely this is a reasonable goal. What's wrong with making prices fairer?
Well, it sure sounds reasonable, but as with all policies, we need to look at the long-term effects on all people rather than just the short-term effects on some. So let's first look at, say, fixing a maximum price. When the price of bread is set too low, the baker will bake less bread. With bakers supplying fewer loaves of bread than before, there's going to be a shortage of bread. But it's worse than that because at that low price, people will demand more. So you create this gap between the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded. So there's cheap bread available, but not everyone can actually get it.
So government price fixing has many drawbacks when keeping prices low, but isn't a minimum wage a different issue?
Well, not if you see wages as being also a price. So when you buy bread, you're not just buying ingredients and so on, you're also buying some baker's time. And when the price of bread is lowered, it creates a bread shortage. Raising the price for a baker's time makes that problem worse.
Okay, at some point you end up with a situation where the legal price of a loaf of bread is less than the legal price of paying a baker to make it.
Well, yeah, if you have both of those policies at the same time, it does get messy. If you take them in isolation, though, the important lesson is that wages and prices can't just be wished up and down, because doing so changes the quantities of the good that people are willing to supply. Ultimately, you get less of what you were trying to get more of, and you undermine the whole purpose of price fixing in the first place.
But the original purpose of lowering the price was to ensure that everyone could afford some of the good or service. If we accept that price controls will change the amount of goods or services available, what about introducing rationing to make sure everyone gets a fair amount?
Well, when you think about it, rationing is really just another monetary system. So there's still a price, but it's paid in coupons or tickets as well as in money. So this can reduce the demand, but ration tickets in themselves are not valuable, so they don't reward people for increasing the supply of goods. The shortage problem is not actually solved, and the situation becomes more complicated by having two monetary systems, one in traditional currency and another in ration coupons.
If the challenge is to increase supply, surely the baker could supply more if his costs were also reduced. Why not reduce the cost of flour and baking equipment? The baker could then produce more at the controlled price.
Well, there is a certain symmetry to that until you look beyond the baker. Now, his suppliers can't cover their costs, so the same problem grows out in ever-widening circles. Not only are customers lining up for bread, but the baker's not even there because he's somewhere lining up for wheat and yeast.
If reducing the baker's income creates all these problems, surely this can be solved by subsidizing the baker's income.
Well, unfortunately, that doesn't solve the underlying problem. The result is that the baker now sells as much as he would have if he were charging $1, and he gets another dollar of subsidy from the taxpayer. That's a good deal for bakers, but it doesn't help people with low incomes because the wealthy can afford to capture more of this subsidy by buying more of the subsidized loaves. All this money from the taxpayer has to come from somewhere, and that means less of other things are produced by government.
So when politicians fix price, it has the opposite effect to what they intended.
Yeah, prices are not a problem in themselves. They reflect powerful economic forces. And fixing prices is like jamming a thermometer or a thermostat. It might make you feel better, but it won't get you warmer. The real problems get worse and go unnoticed due to government price fixing.
This sounds pretty dismal. Are you saying you'd rather people starve than have the government fix prices?
Well, good question, but no, I'm saying that people will starve if governments try to fix prices because price fixing actually reduces production. There are, of course, other ways governments can help poor people without distorting entire markets, and tax credits and benefits are two examples of that.
To summarize, government price fixing creates shortages of whatever product it tries to give people access to, whether it's goods, services, or jobs. Rationing does nothing to alleviate these problems. It just complicates the system by introducing a parallel price system. Fixing the price of a producer's input simply passes the problem up the supply chain. Subsidies for the producers merely transfer the cost to another part of the economy through taxes. Targeted subsidies for consumers can achieve better results. The next episode applies the principles of this lesson to the vexatious topic of rent control. Thanks for watching. I'm Jamie Stevenson for On the Other Hand.